In this video, we're going to take a look at how to create the roughness and metallic maps of a material in Substance Designer. These two maps usually come last in the creation process. We first had to build up the height, then apply some colors, and now it's finally time to add the finishing touches. If we look at what we achieved so far, let me just switch to preview cloth mesh. So if we look at this, we see that even though all the elements are in place and the colors are done, it still misses something, like it looks a bit flat, right? And this is where roughness and metallic information can help. The roughness map determines if a surface is smooth or irregular. If it is smooth, the reflections are going to be focused and bright, and the more we shift towards a rough surface, the more the reflections are going to be spread out and dim. Here again, we'll need to play with grayscale values. The darker the value, the smoother the surface, and the lighter the value, the rougher the surface. There is no real rules when it comes to roughness maps, so you have a lot of creative leeway here. The metallic map, on the other hand, is a bit more constrained. It essentially works like a black and white mask that tells the shader what is raw metal and what is dielectric, which means non-metallic. Technically, a surface is either fully metallic or fully dielectric. There's no in-between, and so your metallic map should look a little bit like this. Now, in reality, metallic surfaces are often mixed with non-metallic elements such as dust, rust, dirt, and so on. So you need to account for these when you create your metallic map. Now, in the case of our material, it should be fairly straightforward. The golden trim and the mountings are going to be metallic, obviously, so fully white. But what about the fabric? Well, if we follow the PBR textbook, it should be completely black, so fully dielectric. But we are going to make an exception here, because adding a bit of metalness will help giving that shimmery look that you often see in fabrics such as satin or silk. This effect is actually caused by a phenomenon called anisotropy. This is something that we can replicate in Substance Designer, but it's a bit more complex and advanced, and we will not deal with this in this tutorial. We will use instead the metallic trick, because it's just faster and easier. But be aware that you will need to control the look of your material in the final engine, just to make sure it reacts properly to lighting. Okay, let's jump into it. I'm going to start by enabling the metallic map in our base material node, and now we need a grayscale base to start from. I'm going to go with something very simple because, again, we need to think of it as some sort of mask, so no need for fine gradients or noise. We can start with a uniform color node, switch it to grayscale, obviously, and pick a medium gray. Let's plug this. And now you see that right away a material gets darker, and we have some nice reflections going on. Okay. Then I'd like to make the ornament weave pop out a bit more, and the way I'm going to do this is by making it more metallic so that it looks shinier than the rest. So in this case, what we're going to do is blend this base with the ornament weave mask that we can find in our portal list here. And to make it more metallic, all we have to do is choose an additive mode like max, then gently feather down the opacity. Here, let me just switch the connection mode to standard because otherwise it's going to be a pain to reroute these last nodes. So if you want to follow along, just go to connection, switch to standard. All right. Next up, we have the trim and ornaments. That's easy because these bits are expected to be fully metallic. So just grab the appropriate mask. That's trim and ornaments here. Then add it on top with full opacity. Now there's a catch here. By doing this, we also made the gemstones metallic, and we don't really want that. This is the part where I tell you to pause the video and try to figure out the solution for yourself. Finished? All right, let me take another blend. This time fetch the gemstone mask and simply subtract it from the rest. Now we have a good metallic map. If we read what we have here, it gives something like slightly metallic fabric with a bit more metallic ornaments, fully metallic trim, and non-metallic gemstones. Perfect. We can now frame this. Metallic. Okay. Now let's move on to the roughness. Enable the roughness map in the base material, which gives this wet look to our fabric because no input means full black and full black means perfectly smooth. This map is going to be a bit more detailed than the metallic map, because here we can play with the full range of grayscale values. So I'm actually going to take the curvature map and adjust it a little to use it as a roughness base. I have two adjustments in mind. The first one is to invert its levels. Let me explain why. If I zoom up close and try to read this image in terms of roughness information, I see that the cavities are darker and so will look smoother, right, than the edges that are highlighted here and so will look rougher. And usually in real life, it's the other way around. Cavities have more surface irregularities because they collect dust or microfibers, whereas the bits that stand out are smoother because they are brushed or polished more often. I hope it makes sense. So to invert an input, you could type in invert in your search bar and grab that node here that does just that. But you could also do it with levels. And I actually forgot to draw your attention to this, but on the tab itself, you have this row of icons that helps speed up some actions. So you have invert here and auto level here. I'm just going to click on invert. You could also do it manually by dragging the keys, but it just makes things a bit faster. All right, so we now have a more convincing distribution of value where the dark areas here are going to look smoother than the light bits here. There's one more thing I like to do though, and it's toning down the contrast because as it is, things will look too intense and noisy. I could do it with the levels node itself, but I'd like to introduce you to another interesting node. If we type in range, we have this histogram range node. Now the histogram range does two things, and to better illustrate it, I'm going to click on the little tool that you have in the 2D view, this sort of bar graph icon that lets you display the histogram. Okay, now what is the histogram? It's something that represents the amount of pixels in your image for each grayscale value, where left means black and right means white. Knowing that, we understand that this image, for instance, has most of its pixels in the middle gray here, and so it's not very contrasted. If I take another one, let me grab, for example, this cell. Now this image, on the other hand, has its pixels spread out across the whole range, and so we have a more balanced distribution of values here. If you want to learn more about histogram and levels, I really encourage you to check out this great beginner-friendly video we have on the topic. It's full of very intuitive examples, and it will just help you grasp the core concepts. Now back to our node here. It comes with two sliders, one that can reduce the range and one that can move it. So keep an eye on the histogram while I do that. See, reducing the range is just shrinking that distribution until all the pixels in the image share the same mid-gray value, represented by that one line in the middle. And if I want to shift that line so that instead of an average gray, I have something darker or lighter, then I can play with the position slider. Easy, right? So let's just reset this. And let's say I want to lower the contrast of our curvature. All I have to do is to drag this a little to the left, like so. And depending on the look I'm trying to achieve, I can either darken it or lighten it. And what I like about these two parameters is that they are very easy to use. And so when the time comes to expose our parameters to the final user, it's just going to make things easier. All right, let's disable the histogram view for now. Next up, we have the ornament weave to tackle if we follow the same step as in the metallic map. So let's add a blend. And this time, all the blends are going to be inverted compared to the metallic. So in the metallic, we wanted to add these elements, but in the roughness, we will need to remove them, or rather to lower their value so that they look more shiny. So here for the ornament weave, we're going to blend it in subtract mode, just so that it shimmers a bit more. All right. Then we have the trim. Same thing. Subtract. Play with the opacity. And finally, the gemstones. There we go. We can now frame this and call the roughness and metallic maps done. At this point of the process, with all the channels in place, I like to take a step back and fine-tune things that may not look right. This is when I usually start checking my material in ray traced mode to troubleshoot issues. We can do that in Designer by going to the 3D view. And here you see we have two renderers. We have OpenGL, the one we're currently using, and that is here for preview purposes only. And then we have IRA, which is ray trace. Now you see that when I switch to ray tracing, the fabric looks really dark and rough all of a sudden, and we lose all the nice reflections that we had in preview mode. And that's because the normal is too strong. When we started building our height map, we deliberately set a pretty high intensity to see things better. Now it's making the weave too noisy and it kind of breaks the shading. So the first thing we're going to do is drop the normal intensity to 2. Okay, that's already better. Then I think we should maybe soften the base weave a little because it still feels a bit too intense and noisy in my opinion. Now there are many ways I can do it. First, I will blur the weft threads a little. 0.2. Okay. Then I will reduce the contrast of the weave with a histogram range again. And here I need to make sure that I stay roughly in the same values so that the height blend that comes after keeps the same balance. All right. See the difference? We're just removing some of these spikes here that made the fabric too noisy. I think it's better this way. Maybe one more thing before we wrap this up. I like to make the pattern, like the ornament weave, pop out just a little bit more in the color. So I'm going to add a quick blend here, just after the base weave. Take the ornament weave mask, and use the same input, and just play with the blending mode. I think add should work well if we set up a very low value. All right, it definitely helps. Something that I like to do at this stage is to put the material under different lights. You can find them in the library down here in the HDRI section. So all you have to do is pick the HDRI you want to test, drag and drop it in the viewport. And then you know the drill. Control, Shift, right-click to rotate and inspect how your material behaves. It's probably my favorite thing to do in Designer. Okay. So in this video, we went over the creation of the roughness and metallic maps, two important properties that help bringing a fabric to life. It looks like we are done with the material creation itself, but there are actually two more maps that I'd like to tackle in the next video: translucency and displacement.